All right. Welcome, everyone, to your Enhancement Talent review for WWE Hell in a Cell 2019, the possibly worst pay-per-view of 2019, the worst ending of 2019, and possibly the worst of all time. I'm going to try to make sense of everything. I'm going to try to break everything down to the best of my ability that I can with this god-awful show. Starting with the main talking point. And we're just going to go straight there. We're not going to waste any time. We have ranting to do. So I'm going to start with the main event, and then I'll go back to the beginning and work my way through. But just so we get everything out of the way early, anyone who is going to click on this to see the main event and nothing else, you can just watch the beginning and be on about your day. So, main event. Seth Rollins versus the Fiend Bray Wyatt inside Hell in a Cell for the WWE Universal Championship. And I had said from the time that this match was announced that I felt like it was too early. I felt like it would have been better for Bray to be able to build up that character, to be able to get some big wins over some other opponents that aren't champions, and build it up and build it to a WrestleMania sort of show, and then have that be the moment where he gets the championship match, he wins the championship match. But WWE is the most impatient company that they just couldn't wait. They saw the dollar signs in their eyes with this guy, and they said, well, fuck, we need to sell Hell in a Cell tickets. Let's just put him in the title match. So they did it. They booked Bray Wyatt versus Seth Rollins. And from that point, as much as I disagreed with it, I still said, it's fine. It's not what I would do, but it's fine as long as Bray wins. And, yeah. But we'll break things down before we get into my full thoughts on everything. The Fiend's entrance is just as awesome as it was last time. There were no changes, even though, there were reports after the first one of maybe the lantern was a little bit much with the severed head and the eyes sewed shut and all that, but everything was exactly the same and just as awesome. Only the second time we've seen that entrance, it's still awesome. The only thing I'll complain about on the entrance is that the commentators should not talk at all during that entrance. What we are seeing is speaking for itself. And, they gave it a few, like halfway down the ramp, they started talking. Just don't talk at all. Just let us soak that in. Maybe when he, starts to enter the ring, then you can start talking. But just let us soak that in. Now, after the entrance, what they did with this match was they did not change the lights, so everything is in that dark red color, and you can see it in the picture behind me here. That's how this whole match looked. That's how the whole presentation was. Sin Cara-esque, just minus the botches. So this was annoying throughout the whole match, and really it was an eyesore. But I don't know if they want this to be a full-time deal with the Fiend. I get that they want to make him seem unique and different and all that, and I admire that they're trying to do that, but this just makes it seem too gimmicky for me, personally. And I know, I'm thinking the Fiend is too gimmicky. But, you understand. So going through this match, Fiend, the ongoing theme the theme for the Fiend was that he no-sold everything. Well, almost everything. He no-sells kendo stick shots early. Rollins eventually gets the better of him with the steps, and he does a frog splash through a table, but the Fiend gets up. Rollins hits a stomp. That's another ongoing theme. Rollins hits a stomp, which Fiend gets right back up from, and he ends up hitting a Sister Abigail for a near fall. After this, Bray gets the mallet, the same mallet that we saw on Firefly Funhouse that was used to kill Rambling Rabbit, probably the first time that he died out of, 1,000. So he got that mallet and tries to use it on Rollins, but Rollins gets the better of him. Rollins hits him with the stomp on the outside, gets him in the ring, hits 3 more stomps as the crowd erupts into boos as soon as Seth was going on this run of stomps. Bray gets right up after 3 straight stomps. Rollins hits a pedigree, hits another stomp, kick out at 1. 4 more stomps. Rollins doesn't pin him this time because he realizes that it's not going to work. So he instead gets a chair. Rollins stands over Bray, who is lifeless. This is actually the picture, I believe, that should be in the background right now. He hits him in the head with this steel chair. And I know he didn't really hit him in the head. He hits the mats next to him, or a little bit further, but it still looked good. And maybe that's because, and I think that might be one of the reasons they went with this, because they were doing a lot of stuff to, the head, or at least in theory to the head. So maybe the lighting was so that, you couldn't really see it as well. I don't know if that's why they put it in there, or if it was just an alternate benefit of it, but it definitely helped. And being that they don't really do chair shots to the head, I was and when I say chair shots to the head, I don't just mean the one that Cody took at all at what was it, Double or Nothing, where it's an unprotected chair shot to the head. I mean, WWE doesn't do anything to the head at all, whether it hits or not. So Rollins gets the chair, he stands over the lifeless body, hits a chair shot to the head. Bray kicks out at 1. Rollins then puts the chair over Bray's face, gets a ladder from underneath the ring, slams the ladder into the chair, into Bray's face. Kick out at 2 this time. So that got him an extra second. Rollins then gets a toolbox. And instead of actually getting a tool out of it, he's going to just use the toolbox as the weapon. Rollins puts a chair wedged between a ladder over Bray's head. And he hits it with the toolbox over and over and over and over. And at this point, Rollins is still not going for any pin attempts or anything. So now Rollins goes out of the ring again. He gets a sledgehammer. And this is the point where the ref is telling him, or trying to tell him not to do it, that he doesn't want to go down that road, blah, 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 blah. Rollins hits everything that is on top of Bray with the hammer, and then the ref calls for the bell in a Hell in a Cell match. So, while everyone is calling this a disqualification, it is listed on Wikipedia as a no contest. And really, the ref didn't disqualify Rollins. It was more so that what they're trying to say is that the ref had no choice but to stop the match because someone could die, I guess. So in the safety of others, the referee calls for the bell. Officials come out and they try to tend to Bray. They try to put him on a stretcher, but Rollins goes back for more. He stands over him, but Bray then puts him in the mandible claw, lays Rollins out with a Sister Abigail onto the exposed concrete floor. Then a mandible claw, which it appeared that Rollins popped a blood capsule for. I don't know what the point of doing a blood capsule when they're doing like that dark lighting and the lights going in and out, and like you could hardly see it. Crowd throughout this is chanting, "Restart the match," and simultaneously later they chant for AEW. But nothing happens. The lights go out. Bray stands atop the ramp and looks back and does all that. So, to get to the point, did this ruin The Fiend? And not necessarily. It did not per se ruin The Fiend. We have not reached the point of no return. We have not entered the point where Bray is a joke and anything he does should be treated as such. We haven't entered the point where it's clear that he can't hang with the top guys. We haven't entered that point. But tonight, we took one step in that direction. Because the problem that WWE doesn't think about with doing stuff like this is that they take for granted how much their audience knows now. It's not the 1980s anymore. If you did something like this long ago, where the match gets thrown out, it's too out of control, we have no choice but to stop this, then maybe people would buy it. But with today's crowd and the quote-unquote smart fans, they know that this is what WWE intended to do. They know that this was the planned finish of this show. So, what it does is it tells us as the fans that WWE, they liked The Fiend, they liked the character, they like making money with him, but they're not ready to put the title on him. They're not ready to let him carry the wagon or pull the wagon or whatever. They're not ready to put him at that spot, which is fine. The perfect solution to that is just don't book this match. Nobody held a gun to your head and said you have to book Bray versus Seth at Hell in a Cell. Good, and you have to go from there. Find out a finish. Nobody forced you to book this match. WWE made this bed, and now they have to lie in it. And lying in that bed is going to result in a lot of criticism. It's going to result in a lot of anger and frustration from people like me, people like you, anybody who actually is passionate about watching this show and watching wrestling. It's going to make those people upset. And so that's the consequence that WWE has to deal with, because they felt like they needed to make this match happen. And it's what I call Ryback syndrome. And now Bray Wyatt has taken the step into that syndrome. If you remember all those years ago, Ryback went on that massive undefeated streak, killed everyone for months and months and months. But then he finally got in a WWE title match with CM Punk. They pulled that stuff with the crooked referee, Brad Maddox. He gets a low blow on Ryback as he's refereeing the match, and Punk rolls him up, and that's how they beat Ryback for the first time. Now, this is better than that, because Bray didn't lose this match. He wasn't pinned. He wasn't made to look as bad as Ryback looked that night. I will give it that much. They went out of their way to make Bray still look like an unstoppable force. But that doesn't doesn't neutralize the damage that was done. You went this far, but you weren't able to finish it. At some point, you have to shit or get off the pot. And we don't know if their intention is to anytime soon put the title on Bray and go all the way with him. But now they've put him in that position where they had to make the decision now. And they chose not to. And I see people on social media, Twitter and all that they're trying to justify this as the Fiend's never said anything about the title. He had no affiliation for the title. He didn't want the title. He just wanted to hurt Rollins, and every promo he did leading up to that, he just wanted to hurt Rollins. And he did that. So they used that to justify this ending. And I have to disagree. Because whether by intention or not, this match makes the Fiend look like he's only at a certain level. That there's a glass ceiling above him that he can't break through. And, that's how a lot of guys in WWE get treated. There's only so far amongst the ranks that you can go. And maybe the Fiend has now hit his glass ceiling. Which is a shame, being that we're only 2 matches into this character. I'll tell you what, if this didn't ruin the Fiend, and we can argue that however you want, it sure as hell ruined this pay-per-view. And I don't feel like there's any debating that. This pay-per-view, barring the opening match, which I thought was great, especially in comparison to the rest of the show, this pay-per-view stunk. And this Bray Wyatt finish was the cherry on top of the shit sundae that we were force-fed by World Wrestling Entertainment tonight. After the show, I saw a video come out. The crowd was chanting refund. I cannot blame them. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a riot started in that stadium. People just refuse to leave and start tearing apart the stadium. I mean, I can't fathom spending money to go to that show. And, for a lot of people, drive out of their way to go to that show. I mean, I've been to shows where I've driven 4 hours, 12 hours. If I drove a long way to go see that show, I would be pissed off. I'm pissed off enough. I want WWE to refund the last 4 hours of my life there. But yeah, I don't really know what else I can say about the Fiend. We'll see how WWE try to rebound. They have the draft now. They have the choice. They can either they can send Bray over to SmackDown. They can send Rollins over to SmackDown. And we'll see what they want to do. It'll be telling, because if they leave Bray and Seth on the same brand, then I don't know if they can really not have a rematch. Like, it doesn't seem right. Looking at the chat, Anthony up next says, thought the match was good, but the ending was embarrassing. The Fiend should have become champion. Totally agree with you, Anthony. To that point, I don't hate what they did during the match. I thought the idea of Rollins having to dig down to such a dark, sadistic level, to be able to take down the Fiends, but nothing works, and that would have been cool. The only difference, though, is that, and they basically did it, was that basically the stretcher spot where they're going to have him on the stretcher, but Rollins stands over him, and then gets put in the mandible claw. If they would have just done that like when Rollins had the ladder and the chair and the toolbox, and then he went to grab the sledgehammer, but instead of him hitting that, the Fiend just rises from the ashes and puts the mandible claw on, gets the victory that way, then I think that would have been a fine way to do it. I thought the build to the match was fine. I really liked the story that they were telling, even though, the lighting and all that was annoying. But other than that, I thought it was a good idea. And whoever put the match together, as far as, the in-ring stuff, I'm sure Rollins and Bray had a lot to do with it. But, everyone who was helping with that, I definitely give that credit, because I liked the way they built to it. And I also liked that with both of the Fiend matches so far, with him and Balor and now this one, they aren't wrestling matches. They don't just go into, collar and elbow tie-ups and headlocks and all that. And it shouldn't be like that. When you have a character like this, it should be a unique experience. And I like that they are at least letting the Fiend do that. So I give them credit for that. But we're going to circle back here. We're going to go to the beginning of this show. After I scroll up in my notes here, it starting with the pre-show. And I tuned in maybe 20 minutes into this. And the first thing I see is Natalya versus Lacey Evans about to start. And it's ironic, I wrote this. I wrote, if I have to see one more fucking match between these two. So, of course, later it was announced that they'd have a last woman standing match the next night on Raw. So, just the finish of this match, Lacey misses a moonsault, and Natalya puts in a sharpshooter. Lacey quickly taps out. As soon as this hold is applied, she just taps out. There's no hope for her. And after the match, Natalya lays out Lacey with a punch, a woman's right. Because you see, Natalya was stealing Lacey's finisher, Lacey was stealing Natalya's finisher, so now Natalya stole Lacey's finisher. Ooh. Tomorrow night will be the 5th match between these two in the last month. Why did this need to be here? So that was the only match on the pre-show. And going into this, there were 3 matches announced by Friday for this show. It ended up with 9. I would have much rather if there were just 3 matches and this could have lasted an hour. We could have gotten the pain over with, but it was long and strung out. And that's part of what made the ending so frustrating, because this pay-per-view was a lot of nothing. And then to have that at the end just made it all the worse. But we start off with really the only overwhelming positive I can come out with this show, and that's Becky Lynch versus Sasha Banks. And so Sasha is going to start off this match, the second Women's Hell in a Cell match, the same way the first one started, with the heel taking out the babyface as the cell is lowering. Charlotte did the same thing to Charlotte in 2017, I think it was. So Sasha does that to Becky. And she attacks her. She gets her out of the cell, beating her up. Becky ends up eventually getting the better hand. The cell gets lowered with them on the outside. But Becky, when they both get back inside, takes the chain from the ref trying to close the door. And uses it as a weapon, punching Sasha and beating her with it. And then afterwards, she locks the door herself. Sasha later got Becky's arm in that door and slammed it multiple times. So that was some comeuppance for Becky. She should have let the referee close the door. Maybe if the ref would have closed it, it would have been tighter, and her arm wouldn't have been able to fit in there. Banks hit meteoros from a load of different spots into a ladder that was set up against the cell, which was nice looking. Onto Becky, who was seated in a chair, and then eventually through a table even. And thankfully the table broke, unlike the last Women's Hell in a Cell match. Sasha ends up getting a ton of steel chairs, makes a pile in the ring, and she ends up eating a Bexploder off the ropes into said steel chairs, and then Becky locks in a disarmer. She gets the tap out victory. And Sasha after that was distraught, just in tears practically. And Becky comes away with the win, which I predicted that Sasha would win, because I figured that Becky was going to make the move to SmackDown. So this was a bit of a surprise. With all the advertisement of Becky on SmackDown, and even on the premiere on Fox, she was in one of the marquee segments of the night. And I really thought that they would put Becky on SmackDown to really be the headlining woman on that show. But now looking at it later, maybe that role is reserved for Charlotte. So I'm interested. Maybe they still will. I mean, she could drop it Monday somehow. She could drop it whenever and move to SmackDown. I'm not sure, but this definitely seems like it appears that maybe Becky's going to stay on Raw. Either way, this was a really fun match. It was very brutal. There were a lot of good spots involved. All the stuff that Sasha did on offense, the big spot into the chairs. Everything was good in this match. I think it went 20-some minutes. It was a good match. And the only downside is that, now we turned Sasha heel, and now Becky beat her. And I guess she didn't technically beat her at the Clash of Champions show, but either way, it's just unfortunate. Like, There has to be a winner and a loser. Unfortunately, for Sasha, she turned heel, got all the momentum going off the return, but couldn't take it to the next step. So I think at this point maybe she'll go to SmackDown and we'll get some more Sasha versus Charlotte matches. Which, even though I haven't seen them in 2 years, I feel like I've had a lifetime supply of those matches already. After this, we got Luke Harper and Eric Rowan going up against the team of Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan, and it's announced before this match that it is now a Tornado tag match, which made this match a lot more fun. I will definitely say that. The stuff they did in this was a car crash of a match. Bryan's back by the end of this was torn to shreds. Blood, bruises, welts, everything. Like, Bryan just likes to get the hell beaten out of him. Like, like his back was like his chest at the Greatest Royal Rumble. Everything in this match was just, car crash material. There were big dives, barricade spots, Eric Rowan doing that whole tearing the barricade off. Roman did a spear through the announce table to take out Rowan. Roman and Bryan end up with, because after that spear, it's just left to Rowan and Bryan in the ring. Rowan is trying to put away Bryan, but in comes Roman. They get Harper in the ring. They all hit their finishers. Superman punch into a running knee, into a spear from Roman. Roman pins Harper, and that gets the win for Bryan and Roman. Afterwards, they did a thing where Bryan extended his hand for a handshake, then took it away because he wanted a hug instead. And Roman at first resisted, but then the crowd doing the yes chants, they hug. Team Hell No style. So I guess this solidifies Bryan as a babyface. Leading up to this, it wasn't really full-fledged babyface yet, but now it seems that they're going all the way with it. Bryan is, I hate to use the term utility player because that seems demeaning, but he can play any role that is needed of him. If you need him to be a heel, he can be the environmentalist heel. He can be the comedy heel, as we saw with the Team Hell No stuff. He can be a babyface, and one of the greatest babyface runs of all time going into that WrestleMania 30. He can do anything that is asked of him. So I don't worry at all, even though I really was enjoying the heel Daniel Bryan run. But I don't worry at all with him, because I know that he's always going to deliver. After the match was over, they showed Bryan going up the ramp briefly, and he collapsed into a heap going up the ramp, and then they immediately took the camera off of him. So I hope that was just selling, but I would understand if it wasn't, because Bryan was beaten to shreds on this match. So after this, we got Randy Orton versus Mustafa Ali, or Ali, depending on your preference. This match was set up in a pre-show interview with Ali. Orton interrupted, or they called back to when Orton injured Ali, taking him out of the run that he was on, the Elimination Chamber match and all that. So this match, you know, I don't want to say it was bad, because it wasn't, but it just felt unneeded. Like, I don't know who was really clamoring to see this on this night. This would have been fine on a TV match, but this is a pay-per-view. This is a impromptu match, and it just didn't feel important. But going into it, Ali at some point got a wicked bruise on his ribs, his stomach, wherever it was. But I assume that it was from the announce table spot, because, you know, Orton loves throwing people on the announce table. But he does, like, normally he does the back suplex and the back lands onto the table. This time he did it both ways. He did the back suplex, and he also did the front suplex and hung Ali up sternum first. So I assume that's where it probably came from, because that looked pretty rough. But there also was a big throw into the post spot, which looked pretty brutal. I don't know if that could have been where it was, but I assume it was from the announce table spot. So Ali had one of the coolest counters of an RKO I think I've ever seen. Because Randy, I assumed, hit this RKO, but as Ali is going down, he lands in a handstand. But he does all of this only to 20 seconds later be hit with an RKO when he does that thing from the apron. He does the roll through. He tries to do the face buster, but Orton catches him with an RKO. And so this is like a nitpick thing, but I hate how, and it happens pretty often, at least semi-often, Orton hits the RKO, and then he sits there, he smiles, soaks it in, and then when he feels like it, then he crawls over into the pin, slowly but surely, and still gets the 3 count. I don't like that, because it just makes Ali look weaker. I mean, it makes the RKO look more devastating, because it keeps him down for even longer. But I don't like that it feels like it's going out of your way to try to make your opponent look worse. Which I'm not suggesting that's why he's doing it, but it's just a little thing that's always bothered me. But either way, you know, this was a fine match, but again, I didn't need to see it. I didn't need to see it tonight on pay-per-view. And speaking of things that I didn't need to see, Asuka and Kairi Sane versus Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross for the Women's Tag Team Championships. And I was ready to hate this, but I'll give it some credit. Asuka and Kairi randomly during this match start working as heels. I don't know why. Well, I guess I know why, because of the finish. But I don't understand why they just out of nowhere are heels. Just another ghost heel turn. So, also randomly, Asuka wins by using the old green mist to the face of Nikki Cross, then hits a kick to the face to pin Nikki Cross. Asuka and Kairi Sane are the women's tag team champions now as heels, with Asuka wielding the green mist that Tajiri must have lent her. So, this would have been cool if there was any build to it. And I mean any build. The only build that these women's tag matches have gotten are just, okay, here's the match. The closest thing to a storyline they've had is the whole Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross friendship, which wasn't really much of a storyline. And how it works at this point is, okay, well, we can't do anything much more with the Iconics, so we have to put the titles on someone else. Okay, here's Nikki and Alexa. Okay, well, we've already had them beat everyone like 3 times over. I guess there's nothing left to do with them. Let's put them on Kairi Sane and Asuka. Rinse and repeat. And I'd like to be wrong, but I don't really feel like there's going to be much change. I feel like it's just going to be, okay, here's Asuka and Kairi Sane versus this team. Beat them. Here's Asuka and Kairi Sane versus that team. Beat them. And go through that whole cycle until eventually there's nothing left to do with them and you have to have someone beat them. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully they're able to capitalize on the I hate to call it a heel turn because it was never really a turn. They just came out and were heels, but the heel tandem of Kairi Sane and Asuka. We have the Viking Raiders with a mystery opponent set to go on against the OC in a 6-man tag. Their mystery partner ends up being Braun Strowman. And Braun, of course, he had the thing with Tyson Fury on the SmackDown debut on Fox. So with this match, what they wanted to put over was that Braun has a good punch because he's going against a boxer, you see. So by the end of this ends in a DQ, by the way. The old TNA finish. Disqualified for kicking too much ass, as Anderson and Gallows were both in the ring stomping at Braun. So the ref calls for the bell. So why this was on pay-per-view, don't ask me. So afterwards, the Viking Raiders, they take out Gallows and Anderson on the outside, and that leaves AJ and Braun in the ring. AJ goes for a phenomenal forearm, but in midair, Braun catches him with a knockout punch. I guess they're giving him Big Show's old finisher, the weapon of mass destruction. So AJ is selling this like he's knocked out unconscious. And so then, when Gallows and Anderson help him up, he wobbles his legs, he falls to the ground, he insists that he's alright, but then he trips over the ropes trying to get out of the ring. He doesn't know where they are. So, I guess head trauma is now a storyline. That's classy, but, you know. I get what they were trying to do here with Braun and Tyson Fury. They wanted to put over what Braun can do with these hands. So I get that. But this had no business being on a pay-per-view. It had no business with a finish like that. This would have been a fine TV angle for a pay-per-view. It didn't need it. There was a lot of fat to be trimmed from this pay-per-view. Just stuff that we didn't need. No, there was just so much stuff that didn't belong here. Alright. After this, we get Chad Gable versus Baron Corbin. We get Chad Gable and Baron Corbin after a long-ass video package and a Baron Corbin promo. So this match was good. I won't say it wasn't, but I was still kind of bored by it, probably because I've already seen them have 2 matches recently, so it was a lot of the same stuff. Gable is going to end up getting the win, though, because Corbin tries to use the scepter, as he did in their last match, to get himself disqualified. But this time he misses the shot with it. He goes back in with it, but the ref takes it out of his hands, and that distraction allows Chad Gable to get the roll-up and the pinfall victory. And so, for context, in Corbin's promo, he crowns Chad Gable with the new name of Shorty Gable. And so when Gable wins this match, Greg Hamilton announces, "Here is your winner, Shorty Gable." What? So because Baron Corbin says so, that's his name now. And even later, he had the interview where Caleb Braxton was like, "Hey, oh, Shorty, my bad." Makes no sense. But yeah, Gable gets the win. I'm assuming this is going to set up another match at some point. Corbin later assaults Gable after said interview. He lays him out, throws him around. So I'm sure they're going to get another match out of this. Cool. We have Bayley versus Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's Championship. This was a match that was added, I believe, either yesterday or Friday night, after Charlotte got the pinfall win over Bayley in the tag match on the debut of SmackDown. Or not pinfall, she tapped her out, right? Yeah, I think she tapped her out, but I don't even remember. So, anyway, in this match, Bayley tries to roll up Charlotte with the feet on the ropes, but the ref catches it. Bayley tries to say she didn't do it, but she's too distracted, and Charlotte hits a boot, followed by putting Bayley in the figure 8. Bayley taps out. Charlotte wins her 10th Women's Championship. 10. In what, 3 years? Can you believe that? So, this is the one that bothered me, because I didn't mind Sasha losing as much, because it was against Becky, and, you know, they've done a good job with Becky, and in this case, at least it was the first time Sasha's lost since she's come back. Or at least the first time she's taken a pin or submit. In this case, Bayley, about a month ago, in a tag match, was beaten, I believe, by Charlotte. And now on Friday, she was beaten by Charlotte. And now on Sunday, she was beaten by Charlotte. So it's pretty clear what the pecking order is here. And Bayley, after turning heel, I don't think she ever got the same momentum going that Sasha did. I don't think she ever had that much around her. Like, they turned her heel. It was a big shock moment. But then after that, I mean, it's basically like she's still a babyface. She does all the same things. She has the same entrance music, the same inflatable tube men, the same ring attire. So, like, I get, too, that they're trying to make it seem like, well, she is still the same, but now she's a heel, and she's using the delusionalness to her benefit, because she still thinks she's a role model, but does heel tactics. And that would be cool if they played into that more, but they don't really. They did the one promo with her the night after she turned heel, and then after that, it's just been like it doesn't exist. So, now, after that, she beats Charlotte at Clash of Champions with cheating, with the exposed turnbuckle. And so they felt the need to make a rematch of that, and then have Charlotte win. All just to add to Charlotte's legacy of this many time champion. They're going to skyrocket that number as quickly as they can. So don't be surprised if she loses it not too long from now. But they're just going to keep putting her in these spots. Bayley, and this is another problem, is that the WWE right now, they have 4 women on their roster that feel any source of credibility. And that's the 4 horsewomen: Sasha, Bayley, Charlotte, Becky. They have no depth on that roster. And I don't mean in talent-wise, because they have a lot of talent. Ember Moon, Natalya, there's a lot of talented girls on that roster. But as far as being credible, as far as having a good track record and having a feeling of being a possibility that you could beat one of those 4, it doesn't feel like it's there. So, and they did a terrible job with Ember Moon earlier in the year. I've ranted about that plenty of times. Hopefully we'll see Naomi back sometime soon. Other than that, I don't know what's there. So, I guess that's how we're going to leave here, because I talked about the Bray and Seth match at the beginning of the show. And, yeah, that's about all I got. If you want to hear my thoughts on the Bray and Seth stuff, just go back on the playback and go through that. Flawless Victory says, ending was trash, 3.5 out of 10. I think 3.5 is being generous, to be honest. I thought this show was really... The Sasha and Becky match was good, and I thought nothing else ever came close to that. On second thought, the tag match, the Rowan and Harper match versus Reigns and Bryan, I did like that. I thought that was a pretty good match, and at least it concludes that story, and it did a good job, at least, with that storyline in the tail half of it. So, that was good. But other than that, this was an awful pay-per-view. I thought this might have been... I mean, I don't have every pay-per-view of the year up in front of me, but I thought this was possibly the worst pay-per-view of 2019. And this is the second Hell in a Cell, year to year, that has ended with a main event Hell in a Cell match, which somehow ends with a no contest. Last year, we had Brock Lesnar interfering, and Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman just laid on the mat for all of eternity, so the match ended. And now this year we get the ridiculousness of Seth Rollins and The Fiend. But that's all I got for you guys. We'll be back for Raw tomorrow night. We'll be NXT, AEW all throughout the week. SmackDown on Fox. We'll have that up on Friday. But thank you for everyone who tuned in live and anyone watching the playback. Be sure to give this video a like, comments, subscribe, and do all that YouTube stuff that helps us out here. And we'll be seeing you guys later. Thank you.